Thank you all so much for coming out. I hope everybody is dug out from the blizzard. It's came just basically at the right time for the lecture series, so any later and you would have been not in a good spot. So my name is Kristen. I'm the Director of Public Programs here at Historic London Town and Gardens, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the first lecture for this season's lecture series, which is on some of the cultures that came here and settled in colonial London town. So first we have Dory Gean coming up today, and I'll introduce her properly here in just a moment. But coming up next week, we will have Dr. Farley Grubb, who is Professor and NBER Research Associate in the Economics Department at the University of Delaware. And he's going to be talking about English convict servants who were shipped to colonial Maryland, and how Maryland planters valued convict servitude, the labor that convict servants contributed. If you're interested in our other upcoming programs for the rest of the season, we have these guys up at the front. So we have a listing of almost every single program coming up this year. Make sure to pick that up, stick it on your fridge for the rest of the year. And so I think we're ready to start with Dory, so let me introduce her properly. Dory Gean Cunningham is an independent scholar of early Maryland cookery and domestic arts, with more than 20 years experience in this field of study, both in practicum and scholarly research. She has taught historic domestic arts throughout the school system in the Baltimore, Washington area, as well as various historic sites. When not engaged in history, she has been found performing in local theater and has also assumed the role of costumer. She also loves reenacting at many historic venues along the East Coast and welcomes any opportunity to impart her love of history to both children and adults alike. Please join me in welcoming Dory Gean Cunningham.
Well, good morning. I am so excited. Look at how many people came. Wow, kind of feeling good. All right, well, when we think about the culture, you may believe that I'm going to really talk about more about how each group of humans that were here in the colonies would actually interact with their food. Instead, I'm really going to talk more about how food was acquired. The fact that food was actually more global than like today. I mean, much of our food comes from all around the world. It did also here in the colonies. So this talk is really an overview more than an in-depth examination of how each culture affected one another. So let's start. And food, those simple ingredients when put together can make a humble or even an elaborate dish. You can see this cook here. She's really busy, but we don't know what she's cooking. We can kind of guess by the items that are there on that table, the cabbage. She looks like she has a bit of beef there. So we could maybe guess she's going to make something, with cabbage and beef. But we're really not sure. And it really doesn't tell us where she got it. It doesn't tell us if she actually is a farmer herself and she's just cooking a meal. It's just a section of time that we see someone who is using it, ingredients. So how do we find out about ingredients, and especially during the colonial period? And then we're going to ultimately talk about where they originated from. So it's not just going to be from the colonial period, but we're going to look further back. So again, how can we, and that's you guys too, if you decided you wanted to go look into this field of study after today, where would you find the information? Well, the first one is printed medium. It's pretty easy to know that if you look in a cookery book, it's going to give you the items that a cook's using. But it's really going to give you more of the popular recipes of the day. They're not going to give you those humble things. It's not going to all the time tell you how to bake a loaf of bread. They expect you to know that as a cook. So these are really more those for your really wonderful dinners. It's not going to have the most humble of dishes either. We can also look at gardening books, and I know that there are many gardeners here, so this would be, there are many period gardening books, and they're really going to let you know the plants The plants that are growing, that might be growing here or being brought, the produce brought from other places. So it's more encyclopedic. It's going to give you the Latin name. It's going to give you the origin. It's going to give you the best way to grow those things. So the next thing we can look at, and this is the majority of this talk is going to come from advertisements. This advertisement here, the advertisement tell you what's lately in or just imported. This one is from 1761, and John Colton is selling from his ship, the General Wolfe. And sometimes they're selling directly from the ship. Sometimes it's going to an actual store. But this one's off a ship, and he's looking for tobacco to take back to Liverpool. But in the meantime, he has some white salt, some good Cheshire cheese, some Liverpool ale, in case you all were missing that, you colonial people. And also dry goods. That might be, some food stuff. It might actually also be cloth. So, when they use the term dry good, it's a generic term. The next one, and this is, I love this one because it's Mr. James Dick of London Town. This is his advertisement, and he has adverts from the 1740s all up until the 1770s. This one's from 1774. And Mr. Dick and Mr. Stewart are selling out of Annapolis and out of here in London Town. But here he's imported from London Madeira wine, porter, English and country-made cheeses, among several other things. I mean, you can see he's got pipes, he's got all kinds of stuff. But that's the food stuff that he has to sell. Now, these type of advertisements, let us see what's being sold and from where they're coming from. So, next thing you can look at is, that jumped real quick on me. So we're just going, is personal documents. In the center is correspondence. And why is correspondence really a good thing? It's because a lot of them, there are housewives and men asking for seeds from Europe to be sent to them because they missed that plant, or the seeds they had didn't grow very well. So please send me the current seeds that you have. So now we start to see what seeds are being traded. On the right is personal receipt books. I don't know how many of you have your grandmother's receipt book or have recipes from your great-grandmother, but those are going to be personal receipts, and it's going to show personal recipes that might not be haute cuisine, it might not be popular, but it's going to give us an insight into an area, the type of food that's being consumed. And on the far left, luckily we don't do this anymore, but back in the time, everyone had to keep their record books. They had to keep an account book, because that way if you were on credit, they had their credit book, you had your credit book, it had to match up. But credit books let us know personally what people are buying, but manifests and companies keep account books, and we get to see where they're getting their items from that they're selling. And let's see. And the last part is archaeology. And the reason why I bring archaeology up into this is because written material alone cannot answer all those questions. Archaeological evidence and data give light to perceived thoughts, whether true or not. It'll support it, or it will say, hey, not so quick there. An original belief, like for colonists, was that they were eating a lot of mutton at first. That was a long time ago when we were very young. That's what everybody was saying. Oh, they were sheep eaters, they ate sheep. And then archaeological evidence is showing that the sheep really didn't get brought till later because they need fields. And what was Maryland? It was a big old woods, and they can't survive. So sheep weren't making it long here until we had pastures for them to eat on. But this was my exciting find that archaeologists found in 1999, because I teach early modern cookery. That's from the late medieval period until about 1840. That whole period there, It's an expansion. So the Renaissance is not as much things as there are in the 18th century. So in 1999, when digging in London, they found a banana peel. And that banana peel, yeah, I don't know if some of you may have heard about it, but that banana peel was very interesting because the first documented evidence, written evidence of bananas in London is in 33, I'm sorry. But the data from that banana dates it back 200 years previous. And so people are like, wait a minute. So archaeology gives us some insight that, wait a minute, some bananas made it 200 years before someone wrote about it. Doesn't mean it's popular, doesn't mean it's being used, but it gives us evidence that it was there because remember, I told you, not everybody writes everything down. So, who are the people who are writing? And aren't they lovely men? These gentlemen here are learned. These gentlemen here are middle class to upper class, and they are white. And that's because the majority of documented, especially printed things, are these men here. That doesn't mean that there aren't writings from women, or from freed people, or from people of black, from Asia, or from Africa. But this is the majority of the stuff that you're going to find. And they just look like they're having a good old time, aren't they? That's from 1736. It's called The Scholars.
And they all cook.
Well, some of them probably thought they could. So just letting you know, this is really in London, but who are the colonists here in the States? And again, this is just a real quick overview because, of course, you have your upper class. You have your upper class, of course, is the aristocrats and the gentry. The middle class are going to be your tradespeople, your teachers, people who are making money. Now, they could have some wealth, but they're a class. They're middle class. And then, of course, the poor. Now, if I made it into an actual geometric shape, it's a triangle. And you can see that the upper class is a very small tip of the portion, and the poor just really is the base of all of the colonies. So, now, oops, I think, yep, I did jump. Sorry. So, now we know who they are. We know where we're getting the information. I want to talk a little bit about the fact that, yes?
All right, so you said the scholars were the white upper class sort of men.
Yeah, middle and upper class.
Mm-hmm. Do we have any idea of who the cooks were that were cooking for the upper class or the middle class? Were they male or female?
Well, I mean, they're both, usually at aristocratic, you're going to have men. And then as it dwindles down, more women are infiltrating. There are both sexes, but if you want specifics, I don't really have that here with me right now.
Thank you.
All right, so it's easy for us to think in the terms of the origins of much of our food because we're more globally minded today. I mean, we really are into different types of cuisines. But for our European ancestors, everything was European. If not English, because the colonies were English. So we were Englishmen after all. Everyone here was considered an Englishman unless you were enslaved. Now the colonists who were more likely cared about the origins of these plants and whether they were actually European or not, are really going to be scientists like Dr. Hill here of London Town, who he so wanted to be part of the member of the Royal Society. Now that's the Royal Society of London for Improving Natural Knowledge. And that's really, they were sharing plants and things like that and where they were coming from. So he's one of those people who may have known. Another person might have been Samuel Pepys, I'm sorry, I always say his name wrong. Samuel Pepys. I don't know if many of you have read his journal. It's a pretty cool journal. He's a foodie. He's a real foodie. So he might have known where some things had started. So To get to the moment in colonial America, I want us to look just a smidgen further back. And that's why I started with this picture, because really, for our early colonial ancestors, food is medicine. And it comes from Hippocrates, his saying that, let food be thy medicine and medicine thy food. Because everything, just like everyone's part of a different point in society, every object on this earth has a humor. Medicine is made up of the 4 humors. And, okay, come on. There we are. And don't you love these gentlemen? This is a representation, an 18th century representation of the 4 humors. The gentleman in your far upper left corner, he's phlegmatic. Now, I know, he's a little phlegmatic is wet and cold. It's water. It's winter. It's winter. The man in the upper right is choleric. He's hot. He's dry. He's fire. The gentleman, this old gentleman down in the corner, in the right-hand corner, he's considered melancholy. Melancholy is cold and dry. And I'm giving you this cold and dry, hot and wet, hot and wet, that kind of stuff, because that's really, when it comes to food, that's how they figure out how to balance it. We're going to talk a minute about that. And this very put-together gentleman in the far left, he's sanguine. Now, sanguine is the most balanced of the 4 humors, or so thought. It's considered a masculine humor. It is, melancholy is dry and cold, and it's, he's definitely better put together than the other gentleman. So the reason why I bring this up is because food, the way it was cooked in the earlier time, had to do with making it balanced. So we're going to just take one thing, which is beef, because everyone, that preconceived notions again, that English ate a lot of boiled food. It was boiled. And it really comes out of medicine, because beef itself is considered dry and cold. So what's the best way to balance it? Put it into something that's hot and moist. So boiling it is the best way to balance that piece of beef, so that when you intake it, you're not going to mess up your bodily humors. So they also could roast the meat. Well, how would they balance it? Use a sauce. So, and don't let anyone fool you that the French were the ones that had a lot of sauces. The English had just as many sauces as the French did. The French just had better PR. So, I'm not joking, they did. They had better PR. Okay, I'm gonna break the colonial period down into 3 periods. Historians break it down even more. I'm just going to break it down into 3 periods. The first one is what I would call early colonial America, and that would be from the beginning until the late 17th century. We would call this the survival period of our colonists. And that's because, of course, and I'm using this particular one, which is, this is what we call the lost colony. At the time, it was called the Roanoke colony. And why it's survival is because the colonists were growing stuff here, but they were really waiting for that supplies, that anything that come from relief from England. We're Englishmen, we need good English food to survive. So it's really they're waiting for that, for England to send things to them so that they'll be better here in the state, I keep saying states, in the colonies. So that's really the earliest part of America. The next one is the middle colonial America, and this is where I'm really focusing the most after I finish this part. But that's from the late 17th century until about 1750. And this is really about trade. And that's because we as colonists are able to not only receive goods, but we're also now able to send out goods. We're better equipped to sending things forward, but we still want that good English stuff. We're we're able to plant, we're doing okay, but I'm missing my good old, porter, that good English ale, actually beer, it's not gonna be ale. Ale doesn't travel well, so it's gonna be beer. Beer and ale, the difference is there's hops in it. It's a preservative that'll keep it going. So the last period, of course, is late colonial America, which is from 1750 until the war, until we declare that we no longer need to be a part of England. And this period I like to call self-sufficiency. Now, although growth is still occurring, because we still keep growing, we're even growing today. We're more like teenagers now in the colonial period. You know how teenagers are. They can do everything on their own. They don't really need that help. They don't mind mom and dad being close enough to get a little money from when they need it. To get a little help. That's how we were colonial-wise. That's how we were here in the colonies. We wanted to be considered grown up. So we actually are okay. We can do without some things. I can do without, tea, because I got herbs, I can make herbal tea. I can do without that silk that's coming, because we're making cloth here. I can wear good, colonial cloth that's being made here. So, we're able to share amongst all the colonies. This is a picture of the colonies. But, trade is coming from all over because the ships are going up and down this coast. But for us, we're going to look more, Maryland, Virginia, Delaware, they're trading more frequently. But this is that special place in our hearts, right? That Chesapeake Bay, where here Annapolis sits. And so what I did was I decided to focus specifically on Annapolis and London town. So I was going through all of the Maryland Gazette's advertisements. And they, from about 1728 to, because that's the earliest that they have any in the archives, to 1750. And, oh, hey, go back. There we go. Here is one of the hugest ones I found, advertisement-wise. This is from William Roberts. He had a store on Church Street, and I don't know what this man didn't sell. He seemed to sell everything. If you needed it, I think this was the guy, he wanted you to know he's the guy to come to. He is selling it, it's way further down near the bottom, but he does mention, he's talking about he's got iron, he's got china, he's got silk, he's got cordage, he's got shoes, and then he, just a real quick little line that says, I have nutmegs, cloves, mace, cinnamon, and pepper. And that's all he talks about, food. All of that is just that one teeny line of food. So he's only importing spices, it looks like. That's not his main thing to sell. So what did I find from some of the other men, like Mr. Dick, like other captains who brought their ships in? Meat-wise, they're bringing in, and this is only that's from the advertisements. This isn't saying that there isn't other things coming in, but from the advertisements that you, picking up the Maryland Gazette of the day, would say, oh, that's just in, I need to run down and get that. And there was pickled salmon coming in, and codfish. Now, it is being exported out of England and out of Scotland, but it's also here, because we're sharing the same ocean. So salmon and cod are also being caught on the eastern seaboard. It doesn't really tell us in the advertisements exactly where these are coming from, except codfish is coming from New York, but New York is a port where the ships from Europe come to, and then other ships pick up goods to take down the East Coast. So the codfish could have come from New England or could have come from London. It's not specific. I would need to go to look through the New York papers to see where it was actually coming from. But like I said, we're sticking with just what's coming into Annapolis. So other meat-wise is we have gammons of bacon, we have barrels of pork, and barreled beef. And this is salted, really salted meat. And I don't know if any of you have ever cooked with salted meat. I know there are some cooks here. But I've taken pork and I have buried it in salt till it stops releasing liquid. And then I decided to cook with it. If you ever do this, please, please, please know that just washing it as many times as you can is not going to take away the salt. This is why most of the recipes of the time period add fruit. And that's because the sugar and fruit balances the salt. So this pork and this beef is going to be super salty, and it's most likely going to be in excuse me, stews and for pies that are going to have fruit in it to balance it. But oh, salt, it was, I made it the first time without any sweetener. Those poor people. And I took it to an 18th century dance and put it out and cut it. Thought, oh, look at me. Look at me. And I just saw everybody trying to be so kind and walking over. Oh my goodness. So, you know, you learn. Okay, the next thing is dairy, and they are importing dairy goods. So there is butter and salted butter. Now, I don't know why it was written differently. It could be the same. But I put it up here so that you could see that both are being said. And there's also Rhode Island cheese, and then good Cheshire cheese. Cheshire cheese is one of the most popular cheeses in the 18th century. Now if you get Cheshire cheese, it's pretty smooth. Most likely then, because it's transporting, it's going to be a more packed, tightly dense, almost like a Parmesan or a, one of those harder cheeses. It's going to make it much easier across the Atlantic. So, if you notice, it's not a lot. There isn't yogurt. There isn't milk itself because it's a liquid. It's not going to travel easy. And as it shakes, and if any of you have had highly fat milk, all of a sudden you get a clog right at the top, right, of fat. So it's really going to separate it for you if it's traveling. So these are the only things that I'm finding that. But the butter is coming from New York. I did find that the butter had come from New York. So most likely it was an East Coast thing, because if it's just butter, it's going to travel a little bit better than salted butter, which again is going to be highly salted for travel. Grains, don't you like this guy calling you? Come get some bread. The grains that are coming is wheat, rice, Indian, Indian corn. Oh, the barley's missing. I know barley was on there, so this must have, the barley disappeared. The barley was also being brought in. And then it's also being, bread is being brought in, and most likely it's going to be what ship bread and ship's biscuit and white biscuit is, and that's hardtack. It's going to be a hard bread. And it's, there was a gentleman in Annapolis, and for about 8 straight weeks, he's like, I make ship bread. Buy your ship bread from me if you're getting ready to sail. So there was a gentleman in Annapolis making ship bread. So why they were importing it, it must have been because they knew more, there was probably a bigger manufacturing of it in maybe New York or New England. And so knowing that it's going to other ports where other ships might have need of it. But this gentleman was adamant, buy my ship bread. Fruit. Again, fruit, and you're going to notice that the fruit that's shipping is limes, lemons, oranges, China oranges. There's raisins, citron, and this is not the citron melon, this is the citron citrus fruit. Olives, and almonds. And almonds is considered a fruit in the time period, just to let you all know. if you notice, most of these either are packed in salt or they've come hard, not pitted like we get in the store. You know, it's all ready for us to eat, maybe with a little pimento inside. The olives are most likely coming with their seeds in it. So they're going to come whole, so they're going to travel better. And these are all harder shelled. Notice it's not strawberries, it's not raspberries, blackberries, any of those. It's going to be ones that can hold up to the travel. Now we have herbs and spices. And this is near and dear to my heart, if you know how much I love the kitchen garden out here. This is my teeny little garden at home, or was my home, recently moved. What's being imported is English garlic, ginger, hops, pepper didn't make it, so pepper is also being in, Jesuit bark, and Seneca rattlesnake root. Now I included that because remember I was talking about medicine as food, and even though these two over here are definitely not going to be used in food, because Jesuit bark, does anyone know what that is? Quinine. Yeah, it's quinine. So you're not going to put that in. I don't know why it was so important to have the Seneca rattlesnake root. That was a really interesting medicine that came through that was interesting to me. But English garlic and ginger, that's because ginger grows here, but the wild ginger here is not the same as ginger that's being imported. One is they're actually not even related on the, whatever the plant families are. The hops, of course, are being imported because they grow better in Europe because you need it for, gentlemen? Beer. Yeah, you need it for your beer. So, and beer is, people drink a lot of beer. I mean, that's, the drink, it's not Coke, it's the Coca-Cola of the day. And English garlic, they are cooking with it, but again, it's more of a medicinal thing. But they are cooking with it. There are recipes with ginger in it. And the next part, and this might be good for everybody, is sweets. So we have sugar. We have sugar loaves. Now, sugar's coming from England. It's coming from Barbados. It's coming from Jamaica. It's coming from the West Indies and Bermuda. So it's coming from all those Caribbean and from England. So they're not growing sugar in England. So they must be, taking it there and then sending it here. So we have sugar loaves, okay, fine powdered sugar. And I thought that was interesting because I'm like, how is that transporting? But and I haven't found the answer quite to that, and I promise I'll keep looking. There are a few people who I know are more interested in how certain things are traveling. In the sugars too, which I didn't put here, is not only is it, there's fine sugar, but then there is single refined sugar, double refined sugar, and treble refined sugar. So you have lots of sugars to choose from. And there is muscovado sugar, middle brown sugar, and molasses. Now the reason why I separated these two is because these make those. So they refine these things, get the impurities out, and they get that beautiful white sugar that you like on your table. But some people want the brown sugar, so there is scenes of that. And they are still coming from the same place. The muscovado also came from New York. So most likely it was a ship that went to New York and then took their stuff off and it went to a ship that came to here. Beverages. Now this is non-alcoholic. Over here is my coffee pot. Coffee is being brought in, but I don't have any record of exactly where it's coming from. So it could be coming from all the ports that are importing in. There is Green tea, just tea, green tea, and this bohea tea. This is the tea that shows up the most in the advertisements. So this must have been very popular in this area. And then, of course, chocolate. And I know I put it as beverages. These aren't going to come in a liquid form. They're going to come in a solid form. So again, it makes it easier for them to transport. So you're not getting hot chocolate being brought in. It's just cakes of chocolate or the bean itself. And then this is a lot of advertisements for alcoholic beverages. And this is going to be fun. Just wine. We're going to just do the wine first. Wine, we had French brandy, French claret, Madeira wine, London wine, and that's because they're taking grapes and making wine and then exporting it here. New York wine. So again, there are grapes growing in the colonies. They're not the Concord grape yet. That's later on. But there are grapes starting to grow. People are trying to do that. So there are some wines from there. And then, of course, there is, which I don't think is going to be on here. Oh, Molage wine. That is a really cheap French wine. So it's called Molage. It's a French term. And it just, kind of means it's all kind of put together. Now, port should also be here. Nope, it's not. So we're going to go to rum. Port would be the other one that's being imported. Now this is, there's rum and the gambit of rum. This is the fun part. There's Barbados rum. There is Old Barbados rum, Jamaican rum, West Indian rum, it's Angola. That's where it, one of the manifests is saying it's coming from Angola. New England rum. Oh, okay, let me go back. So New England rum. Most likely they are probably getting the sugar, all that sugar that's coming, and they're producing their own rum and sending it down. Or it's a misprint of somebody taking regular rum and just saying it's from New York. Maybe they're hoping that people will drink it more. Then there's beer that actually is being imported. Even though beer is being made here in the colonies, we still think that the beer, it's just like today. I mean, how many friends of yours, they prefer this, this brand beer more than this brand beer. It was the same in the colonies. There was table beer and strong beer. The brewing of beer is in three. So there's the first brew, which is a strong beer. The second brew would be your table beer. And then the third brew would be a small beer. Isn't worth probably importing is small beer. There's also English beer. And there is a Dorchester beer, which I know is not going to be on here because I'm already missing stuff that I knew was on it. So Dorchester beer was also coming in. And then, of course, there's malt liquor. And so malt liquor was being made in the 18th century. So you can see what their priorities were, huh? They really like their beverages. All right, so the next thing is, and I like to just say other cooking needs, and mainly the other cooking need is salt. And salt is being gathered here in the colonies. It's the process is just taking the bay water, closing it off, allowing the water to evaporate, and then scraping up the salt from there. It's an inferior salt. It's not a great salt. So they really want salt from other places. So white large grain salt. This would be good in, I don't know if any of you pickle, but you know how the larger grains are easier than So, and then we have just white salt, so it's clean. It's not going to have impurities in it. There's coarse salt. There is fine salt. There is fine English salt, just in case. In the Isle of Man, and that's in Scotland. So Scotland must have had some really good salt for it be presented as the Isle of Many Salt. And then, of course, there's oils. I mean, how many of you use oils and fats to cook every day? And there is Florence oil and salad oil. They are the same thing. It's olive oil. So it may be because one's from Italy and one might be from another place, and so it's a more inferior. Here we go. Liver oil. How many of you have had cod liver oil? Yep, they did too. And it's a product, of course, of the cod fishery, and so they were also importing it. And train oil. This is sperm whale oil. And I'm not sure whether they're using it in cooking or whether they're just using it in lighting, but you can eat it. It's not edible. So, but that's the oils that are being imported. Now, there are vegetables, but you notice there's only two, and that's peas and beans. Anyone know why? They're dry, yeah. And that's really, I should let you know that most, here we go. Most vegetables are going to be sold at a local market. That's because they're so perishable. I mean, vegetables on the whole are not, they don't last as long to be sent from England to here. So the seeds, those peas and beans, are of course seeds too. So you can eat it, you can plant it, but markets are that. Or of course, you can go to dealers or the farmers themselves. So you can there are greengrocers that are selling. And then, of course, there are local farmers like myself sitting here selling my wares to anybody who might want it. Or I might, if you, dear, you were planting some stuff and I knew you had some good eggplant, but I have a lot of cucumbers, I might trade with you. Or if you, dear, had an inn, I might come to your inn and say, look, I have all of this. Do you need it? Would you like to have it? It's only this much. And a local inn might purchase it from me. So, it is being traded, but not on a global aspect. It's only being traded very locally. All right, I've talked enough about what's come in. Let's talk about where it began, where they all started. Let's see. See, you notice I don't even pay attention to my own thing. So, for the English colonies, everything, again, is either English or it's foreign, and their origins are most likely Greek or Roman to them. Because where the most ancient texts are, of course, in Greek or Latin. So they're saying, oh, of course, it must have started there because that's who Pliny is writing about, that's who Hippocrates is writing about. So we have to remember that most of the food the colonists ate were tried and true to them. They're not really, jumping out and trying. Tomatoes are growing, not everyone's eating them. And there are many pamphlets out there saying, oh, don't eat it, it could make you too amorous. Some of them, they believed it would make you too amorous. Others are, oh, it'll ruin your humors, don't eat it. So there was pamphlets out there. It wasn't saying it was poison. It was just saying, we're good English people. We don't need to be inflamed. So, so the English when they did have things. They just sometimes were like, it's not good for my humor. Remember, I take you back to that medicine. So let's talk about since we ended with peas and beans. Here we go. Oh, sorry about that. We'll just get talking. So let's talk about peas and beans and where they came from. Peas and beans are thought to have started in Asia and then moved across through trade. Trade is the way things moved, over land. So peas spread early and beans spread early to Africa. Now, I have to let you know that there are some beans that are indigenous to Europe, indigenous to Africa, indigenous to the colonies themselves. And beans that, the black-eyed peas are not a pea, they're actually a bean. And they were actually cultivated in Africa. They were made into these wonderful beans that we have found. And that's the latest DNA belief. And remember, I told you that archaeology keeps changing the way we see things. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But kidney beans, they were known as French beans, but they are actually New World beans. So I don't know why they called them French beans. You know, maybe they just didn't want to think that it came from here, but that it might have come from France. And then, let's see. I thought there was another bean. The broad bean or the fava bean, you know, from that wonderful movie, right? They're actually European. They are a European bean that are distinct from Europe. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the cabbage family, or the coleworts. And there are from all over Europe, the Mediterranean. So kale is English. It is from England. So kale is English. Collards actually are the only colewort that's from the New World is collards. So they are actually a New World plant. The oldest member, and he's here in the foreground because he's my plant of the year. Last year we had such a good bumper crop of them, and that is kohlrabi. Kohlrabi is considered the oldest. It's called the turnip cabbage, and it's most likely German. Of course, the name kohlrabi, kohl is German for cabbage, and rabi is for turnip. So those are broccoli. Is that one little guy that came late to the party? It's really, I haven't found any documentation here in England or in the States until the late 17th century, early 18th century. But it's an old, it's being eaten in the Mediterranean way before that. But for some reason, the English just didn't eat that as much. But they did love that cauliflower. Lots of recipes for the cauliflower. The next one, and that's because, you know, what can you do? You can't talk about vegetables without talking about potatoes. And most of you probably know that both the sweet potato and the potato are from the Americas. They're from South America. And here's where, remember that archaeology, it used to believe that they thought it was from Mexico. And then they, you know, and then they weren't sure, it might be further down. So it's they're still looking for that trigger, that place where it came from. But yams, now if you get a can of yams today in the States, they're most likely sweet potatoes. Yams they do come in as many colors as yams and sweet potatoes come in many colors. But the yam is of course from Africa, and it's a rhizome. So, but they look very similar. When you see pictures of them sitting side by side, they really do look similar. The next thing is we're going to talk about fruit. There are fruits on every continent. There's just fruit on every continent. So the first one we'll talk about is watermelon. And the reason I'm going to talk about this, or melons themselves, is melons started in Asia and again traveled across. And again, Africa cultivated the best melon, didn't they? In Egypt is where it's found first. So it was cultivated there. But melons aren't found any further back in Africa. So they believe that the watermelon actually traveled from, or its great ancestor traveled from Asia to Africa, and then the Egyptians really worked to make that sweet melon. The next one is, I haven't put the banana, I already talked about the banana. The bananas actually, which is so funny, is bananas actually are native of New Guinea. That's where their origins are found. So about 8,000 BC is where they believe that the first domesticated banana was found. So isn't it interesting, because it's being grown elsewhere in the 18th century, how trade really moves these fruits, where we start thinking, well, isn't it a tropical fruit from the Caribbean, or, because of course of us growing up with, the songs like, about the banana boat, and so you kind of start thinking, oh, it must be Caribbean. Well, I did anyway. And the next is berries, and I use strawberry. There are berries on every continent, again, like I said. So let's do New World first. On the New World, there are blueberries and there are cranberries. These are indigenous to North America. These are North American berries. And then Asia, you get your almonds, grapes, and raspberries. And they also have black currants. But black currants are also found in Europe, where the gooseberry and the strawberry and currants are found. Now here's the really interesting thing, and again, it's going to be an archaeologist that's going to shine the light really big, is how blackberries are on every single continent. There's no evidence of trade so far that blackberries were taken from one area to another. There are blackberries on every continent. So that's that one that I can't wait for them to find out. So, and I could go on every single one of these fruits, but some of y'all are going to want to go to lunch soon. So I'm trying to really narrow down the amounts. Just a few that were really, either it was popular for one group here in the colonies, or that we know that, like the banana, it just intrigued me. That's why he's one there. But, the bananas are here. The next one is herbs. And that gentleman down in the left-hand corner, he's a mandrake. But that's, I just thought I'd tell you that there aren't crazy men. The first one we're going to talk about is the alum group, which is onions, leeks, scallions, chives, you call them green onions, garlic. These guys are, and I'm going to give you a little medicine because we're in the herbs again. It's a hot and dry plant. So it's going to help with those choleric things, that wet and cold. I mean, not choleric. It's choleric. It's going to help for things that are wet and cold. And remember, there was ginger. This is wild ginger. This is the ginger that's found here, that wild ginger. But the ginger originated in China. The wild ginger is indigenous to the North America. And again, it helps with phlegmatics, that cold and wet, agues you might have. There we go. This is a spice. This is nutmeg and mace. They go hand in hand because the mace is the membrane that grows around the nut, the kernel. They are actually, and this is what's really wild, they are indigenous to Australia. And that one was a shocker to me because I thought for sure it had to have been Asia, but it's Australia. That's pretty cool. So that shows you that trade had to have happened early from Asia and that, Eurasia area. I mean, not Eurasia, sorry. Australasia area. The next one, here we go, last. There we go. Do you guys know this guy? Do you fight him every year? Yeah. Thank your English settlers for them. It originated in Europe and Asia. They're found both places. They were good for fevers and they're good as a diuretic. They brought it with them. They planted it here. We now hate them for it. They brought the plant itself,
What did they do?
Actually, you can eat the flowers, the leaves as a salad. You can also boil the root to make a wine. So you can use every part of it. So you can eat it. So if your grandkids or your kids go out and make a salad out of it. I need to eat more organically. Go out and pick them. We'll have it. The last part, the next one is
What about mustard?
Mustard, the mustard plant.
Well, mustard seed.
The mustard, well, it would, they're Asian that travel to Europe, but
It's such a ubiquitous thing here now.
there you go. Okay, sorry, I don't have my glasses on. So yeah, mustard was also imported. I didn't find any evidence in this time period, but I know it's being imported at some times. But it's hard. I don't know. Have you tried to grow mustard here? I've had trouble growing mustard here. And it might be because of the seed board or whatever, but if anybody has had success at growing mustard, please let me know. I have not.
There are advertisements in the Pennsylvania Gazette. People are basically grocers and then people who are growing it are looking for it. They were growing it, they're advertising for it from people's crops.
From people's crops. So they're growing in Pennsylvania then. I'm not finding it down here. But like I said, I've been concentrating on this, but thank you so much for sharing that. So that, it's growing so in Pennsylvania, so she's thank you so much for sharing that. That's a good one. Now, the farm animals that you've come to love, or you're eating, you're going to your market, and they all came over from Europe. Well, actually, they came from the Middle East and Europe. Let's start with the cow. And there are animals here. There are ducks, there are geese, there are elk, there are deer, just like there are deer in England. There are dogs also here. But what we consider farm animals, there aren't any here. The cow is actually Middle East, and these animals were domesticated sometime between 10,000 and 11,000 years ago in the areas I'm going to tell you. So the cow was in the Middle East. The pig is in Europe and Asia, and they were wild boar at the time, and they were slowly domesticated. Sheep are from Asia, from Central Asia. Goats are from the Middle East, and chickens are actually from Asia. Now, chickens, when they were first cultivated, were actually cultivated to just be fighting cocks. They really weren't for eating. They're actually more revered. The eggs and the chicken are more revered in Asia. So they'll hang the eggs. They'll blow the eggs clean and decorate them. I don't know, I guess somebody said, hey, what if I put this lucky thing in me? Maybe that's, good. And that might have been when it was. That's me speculating. But it really, they were more revered, and they were more used for fighting at first than they were for their eggs or for eating. So ducks, of course, they can fly, so they can, that's why they're in England, that's why they're in, they're in Europe, they're in, the North America, so are geese. Birds and fish are hard to pinpoint to an area. I can say that they're Atlantic, or they're on the Atlantic area. To know whether they originated on one side or the other, I found no evidence of either. And grains, which again are important for bread and for, and for beer or any alcoholic beverage. There is corn or maize. Now, corn corn, again, archaeologically, they thought started in Mexico. Then they did some more research and they found, oh no, it came earlier. We found evidence in Central America. And then lately, just recently, they did a core dig and they found the pollen of corn back in Mexico. So I'm waiting and anticipating that they'll find it elsewhere again because they keep going back and forth of where it originated. But you can pretty much bet it's Mexico or Central America because that's where the oldest evidence is of them. There are, at the time of the colonial period, at least 7 distinct kinds of corn. Flint corn is tight and hard. Indian corn is the corn you're eating, you know, that lovely moist corn. There's popcorn, there is dented corn. So these are, you know, there are many different types of corn because men are, with every vegetable, there are scientists that are going, oh, I can make it better. So, you know, we're very much nowadays going, oh, we're just changing their genetics. Well, they've been doing it forever. They just haven't been doing it in a lab. They've been doing it, you know, or that poor little bee was doing it. The next thing I'm going to talk about are the cereals, and I love her. I just think she represents, you know, the harvest. Wheat is Middle Eastern. About 7,500 BC is where they believe that they first started cultivating it in the Middle East. And then barley, you know, good barley corn. They're not really clear on that one. Now, it could be North Africa, it could be the Middle East, it could be Asia, but which way it went, you know, where it originally started, they go back and forth. And that's the wonderful thing about science and about history. It's constantly changing for us. Something late comes along and we learn, oh, wait a minute, that's cool, something new. So right now, they believe they've narrowed it to that sort of area. Well, whether it started at one end and went that way or went east is really not for certain. Rye is actually European. So it's all of Europe and part of Asia, a small part of Asia, but rye is. And oats, that lovely oatmeal that you like to have porridge, that is European. That is definitely a European thing. And the last grain I want to talk about is rice. Now rice, of course, we all know is Asian. And I mean, everyone even now goes, oh yeah, that started in Asia. But wild rice is actually North American. It is indigenous to this colonies. So wild rice is, it was in the 18th century, it was being eaten. So wild rice, yay, we actually have something. Now I like sugar. Do you like sugar? Well, sugar is actually, they believe, Polynesia. Now, the first time it hits England, sugar hits England, is in 1099 from Polynesia. It's coming from Asia, so it's not coming from the Caribbean. They just take the seeds there and grow it because it's good. You know, it grows along that heat belt called the equator. It really grows, you know, in a certain amount of area. So, of course, that's all sweets that have been sugared. And then, of course, I also wanted to talk about honey because honey is a poor man's sweetener. Honey was here in the colonies. There were bees in North America making honey. The indigenous people had it. It's a different bee than the honeybee of Europe. The Europeans brought their bees here. So I am not really sure about, you know, what bee is, you know, if the bee today is exactly the kind they had then, or if it's, you know, the two bees have come together and created, I don't know. But the Europeans did bring their bees with us. So there is both European honey being made here and, you know, North American honey. Sorghum, which is thought to have been a sugar, I have found no evidence at all Now, you might have, somebody might have found it, but I'm finding no evidence of it here in the colony of Maryland, except as turkey millet or as, being used as a grain. If it's being used at all, most likely for the lower class or for the enslaved people, but I found no evidence of it as a sugar. It is a sugar by the 19th century, it's definitely being used, but so is beet sugar at that time period. So the two sugars that are really being used are these two here. So I know I probably just keep talking your ears off. I just want to say, isn't it amazing that trade and exploration, through those things, man has spread everything that we love to eat today has come through trade and exploration, that it's growing here or that it's been brought here. And how those same ingredients are shared in Asia. They have those ingredients, but their cuisine is different than the cuisine we have here. It's amazing to me. We're global, yet we're not global. And it's such a fantastic thing. But I like to end on this quote. The pleasure of the table are of all times and all ages, of every country and every day. And that Jean, I am really bad at my French names, so anybody want to give it up? Anybody French? Okay. Jean Brilliant Savarin. Okay, close? But I want to thank you all so much. If you have any questions, I can try and answer. I don't know where we are on time because I'm a babbler, so
We could probably take a couple.
Okay, yes ma'am.
I have a question. You had mentioned back under Dairy Rhode Island cheese.
Yeah.
What is Rhode Island?
It's just a cheese that's being made in Rhode Island that they're shipping out, and it's distinctive to that area. Just like, if you look at cheeses even of the time period now, or even wines, like Champagne must come from the Champagne region of France. So this cheese is coming from Rhode Island to be called Rhode Island cheese.
Okay, so it was like a hard cheese.
Yeah, it's going to travel better. It's not going to be a soft country cheese. It's going to be a hard cheese.
Thank you.
Yes.
This is not a fair question because it's not about the colonies, but from your background, you might be able to answer it. One time I went to a street fair, and it was at Christmas time, and one of the vendors was selling sugar plums. And after that, I've always looked for a recipe for sugar plums, and I can't find it. But then I thought, was she just making it up as something to sell? Or
Well,
is there really something to sugar plums?
There are sweets, like raisins and strawberry, and things that have been dried, not strawberries, but fruits that have been dried, and then they sugarcoat them. I mean, I can take you, hopefully I can take, I'll bring you back to this, my bibliography for anybody. Because sugar wasn't too far behind. There it is. Come back. Come back. Come back. You see these items here, that's most likely a fig that's been dipped in sugar and dried, and dipped in sugar and dried, and dipped in sugar and dried. So a sugar plum may have originated out of plums being, or dates being, or anything else being dipped in sugar.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The recipes I've seen for sugar plums are usually a combination of dried fruits
Yeah, and sugar.
and sugar, so that they all stick together and are formed into different shapes. and
Yeah.
forms. But they're usually dried fruit.
Yeah, that's the best I can tell you. Most likely that fig's a dried fig, but this is of course, a artist, and you know how artists like to lie. They like to make us look more beautiful. Yes?
I was just, sugar plums, maybe marzipan or whatever.
Well, if it's marzipan, it's actually going to be almonds that have been, pounded and pounded and pounded to make into a sweet rolled thing. But I mean, it could be that too, but like Vicki was saying, the recipes, it's usually dried fruit that's being sugared. So that's probably where it came from. Yeah, such a question.
How about the turkey?
The turkey is indigenous, so thank you for asking. That is a North American bird. Why? Because it doesn't fly. If it flew, it probably would be found elsewhere. It doesn't fly far, it flies a short distance. A chicken can fly too. It just doesn't fly very far. So it's not a flight bird. It's considered a flightless bird. Yes, ma'am.
My impression was that corn was extremely important in this 18th century period, but there was no trade in it.
Well, no. Corn was being traded. And let me explain one thing. Wheat is the pinnacle. Everybody wanted wheat. But corn was easy to have. And it was easier to feed your servants and to feed your animals corn than wheat. You want wheat for your table. The corn, we can give it to, but George Washington had corn cakes every day. So, I mean, he had a hankering for corn cakes. So, if we look at the class system, yes, some things are considered like potatoes and turnips, and some melons are considered, that's poor man's food. We really don't want it on our table. And then eventually somebody goes, what, you're missing out. And eventually, I'm sorry?
Lobster.
Yeah, lobsters, well, that's what's really weird, because lobster, if you look at shellfish in the early part of the Renaissance and everything, high up, it's on the tables of the kings and dukes and marchionesses and all that. And then in the colonial period, they come here, and there's so many of it. I don't know that.
There was a limit on how many you could serve.
Yeah,
How often a week they could have it.
Yeah, so, but we have evidence of perhaps being served to the poor because there's so many of them. The oysters, oysters are on everybody's table because you could walk out on the shelf in the Chesapeake because there were so many oysters. They're trying to build it up again. It's really cool. If anybody's been following that, that's a really cool thing. Yes?
Ginger, the indigenous ginger, is that interchangeable with in the recipes or anything?
Yeah, what I believe, it's not going to be in the recipes, but what I believe what's being done is that any cook, if she knows her herbs and stuff, is going out to gather it, she would dig that up. And it's because it grows naturally here and use it just like ginger. So, but I'm not seeing it as wild ginger as opposed to regular ginger.
Are they rhizomes?
It's a rhizome, so it's it's gonna keep going.
It's just smaller and more.
Yeah, it's more trendily down and this long rhizome that's going.
And then sort of related English garlic. How is that different from?
Oh, no, it's just putting a moniker on it. It's coming from England.
It came from England.
But it originated, of course, in Asia because it's an alum. It's part of the onion, that onion group. Leeks, onions, and chives.
I didn't know if it was different.
No, it's just it came from me. I grew it in my English garden. I'm sending it to you. They're just putting it as an English moniker. But yeah, no, that's a great. But like grapes, and I should tell you, like grapes, everything has a different flavor based upon the earth it's grown in. Some of you are gardeners. You can even attest to that. That if you grow it more in the loamy kind of soil as opposed to a very acidic soil, you're going to get a difference in flavor too. So it's just like, grapes. It could be the same grape, but grown on a hillside different than a valley, it's going to have a different flavor.
So Dory, I think we're going to have to wrap up, but Dory will be sticking around, so if you have another question that you'd really like to ask her, sorry about that, please feel free to do so, and thank you all again, and if you don't mind joining me in